Naomi Carter moved through the kitchen like a shadow, her hands deftly arranging plates, stirring sauces, and tasting every dish with a precision that made even the most seasoned chefs pause. She loved being here, in the quiet hum of clanging pots and the faint aroma of garlic and fresh basil, where she could lose herself in her work and stay unseen. In a restaurant like Marco Romano's, it was easy to blend into the background, just another face in the chaos of fine dining. But that evening, as she wiped down the marble counter, she felt a presence behind her. Turning, she caught the sharp gaze of Marco himself, tall and impeccably dressed, observing her with an intensity that made her stomach twist in an unfamiliar way. He didn't speak at first, just watched as she plated a simple dish with a flourish. Naomi could feel the weight of his attention and tried not to let it distract her, though her hands trembled slightly. Marco finally stepped forward, nodding in approval. "You have a gift," he said simply, his Italian accent warm yet commanding. Naomi blinked, unprepared for praise, especially from the restaurant owner, who usually reserved words for critiques. Her lips curved into a shy, uncertain smile. She didn't know if he would remember her tomorrow or if this was just a fleeting observation, but in that moment, something shifted. Naomi realized the kitchen was no longer just a place to hide. It could be a place where she belonged. As she returned to her station, she stole a glance at Marco, who had already moved on to check on the other staff. For the first time, Naomi wondered if hiding in plain sight was enough, or if maybe it was time to let someone see the real her. The evening rush had finally begun to ebb, leaving the restaurant in a soft, lingering buzz. Naomi wiped her hands on her apron, her mind replaying every dish she had sent out. She was tired, yet satisfied. Today had been smooth, almost flawless. Still, she rarely allowed herself to linger on her own work. Praise was rare, and she had learned long ago to savor her victories quietly. That was until Marco Romano appeared at the pass, his tall frame cutting through the steam rising from the dishes. He lifted a plate she had prepared earlier, inspecting it with his usual meticulous gaze. Naomi's heart thumped audibly, though she tried to focus on the simmering sauce before her. This is remarkable," Marco said, his voice carrying across the kitchen just enough for the staff to pause and glance over. Naomi froze, barely breathing. "The balance, the seasoning. Naomi, you've outdone yourself." Her cheeks warmed as her colleagues exchanged glances, some smiling knowingly, others nodding in quiet approval. Naomi had never been the center of attention. She had built her confidence in shadows, where she could control the pace and the praise was always internal. Hearing Marco's words aloud felt like stepping into sunlight after years in a dim room. Without thinking, she stepped forward. Marco extended a hand, but before she could shake it, he pulled her into a gentle, reassuring hug. It was brief but enough to make Naomi feel recognized, seen, and strangely lighter than she had in months. She felt a sense of belonging she hadn't expected, wrapped in the warmth of his acknowledgement. As she returned to her station, she stole a glance at Marco, who had already moved on, busy with the next task. Yet something had shifted. Naomi realized that sometimes, being noticed could be the start of something extraordinary, and that maybe hiding was no longer the safest choice. The kitchen had quieted, leaving only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant clink of dishes from the dining room. Naomi lingered near the prep counter, nervously wiping her hands on her apron. Marco appeared, holding 2 steaming cups of espresso. He didn't hand one to her immediately. He just stood there, letting her curiosity outweigh her hesitation. "You've been working here a long time," he said casually, but there was an undertone of genuine interest. Naomi nodded, unsure if she wanted to reveal much about herself. She wasn't used to someone asking questions that weren't tied to her cooking skills or mistakes. I love it here," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The kitchen, the rhythm, the food, it's where I feel like I belong." Marco smiled softly, setting a cup in front of her. "And yet you hide so well. I've seen your talent for a while, but not the person behind it. You're careful with who you let in." Naomi hesitated, then took a small sip of the espresso, savoring its warmth. "I suppose I've learned it's safer," she said, meeting his gaze. There was a vulnerability in her tone that she rarely allowed anyone to witness. Marco stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Sometimes the people worth letting in make life a little brighter." His words weren't dramatic or forced. They were steady, sincere, and it made Naomi's chest feel lighter than it had in months. Before she could respond, he offered a gentle, lingering hug. A simple gesture, but it carried respect, admiration, and a quiet understanding. Naomi felt the walls around her heart soften just a little in that brief contact. As they pulled apart, she realized that maybe opening up didn't have to be scary. With Marco she could imagine a world where she was seen, not just as a chef but as herself. The restaurant buzzed with a different kind of energy that evening. A high-profile wine tasting was scheduled, and every table, every plate, every detail had to be flawless. Naomi adjusted her apron, taking a deep breath as she surveyed the kitchen. Usually she preferred working quietly in the background, but tonight Marco had assigned her to lead the team. She felt a mixture of nerves and pride. Leading the kitchen meant responsibility and recognition, but it also meant stepping out of the shadows she had grown so accustomed to. The other chefs glanced at her with curiosity and respect, and Naomi realized this was her moment to shine in more ways than one. Marco appeared at the pass, observing with his usual intensity. "I know you can handle this," he said quietly just for her. Naomi looked up, meeting his steady gaze. The encouragement in his eyes felt like a warm anchor, giving her the confidence she needed. The team moved under Naomi's direction, chopping, stirring, and plating with precision. Orders flew in, the clatter of dishes mixing with the hiss of the stovetops, and she found herself immersed in the rhythm. Every completed dish earned Marco's approving nod, and with each glance, Naomi felt a quiet thrill of accomplishment. Before the event officially began, Marco approached her again. "You've done well," he said softly, offering a brief, reassuring hug. It was simple, unassuming, but the warmth lingered, filling Naomi with an unexpected sense of pride and connection. For the first time she felt not only seen but trusted. As the doors opened and guests began arriving, Naomi realized something. Stepping forward didn't have to be frightening. With Marco supporting her, she could lead, excel, and maybe even allow herself to be noticed, without fear. The restaurant had emptied, leaving only the soft hum of the lights and the faint scent of herbs lingering in the air. Naomi was wiping down counters, methodically stacking pots and pans, when she realized how quiet it had become without the constant clatter of service. She welcomed the solitude, yet a small part of her felt unsettled. From behind she heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, and unmistakably Marco's. She straightened automatically, wiping her hands on her apron, though she wasn't sure why she felt the sudden flutter in her chest. He leaned casually against the doorway, arms crossed, a small, amused smile on his face. "You're still here?" he asked, though it wasn't a question so much as an observation. Naomi nodded, returning the smile, careful not to let her nerves show. "Just finishing up," she said. "It's easier to get things done when it's quiet." Marco stepped closer, glancing at the cleaned counters, the neatly organized ingredients, and finally at her. "I like seeing you like this," he said softly. "Focused, in your element, it's inspiring." Naomi's cheeks warmed. She opened her mouth to reply but found herself at a loss for words. Instead, they shared a quiet laugh, the kind that happens when words aren't necessary, when a connection speaks for itself. Before she could overthink it, Marco offered a gentle, lingering hug. Naomi accepted instinctively, feeling the stress of the day melt away in the comfort of his presence. It wasn't dramatic or forceful, just steady, warm, and reassuring, as if he was silently saying he noticed her, valued her, and cared. When they pulled apart, the moment lingered between them, unspoken but understood. Naomi realized that sometimes, the most meaningful intimacy wasn't in words or gestures. It was in the quiet, shared moments, where someone simply held you and made the world feel safe. The weekend streets were alive with music, laughter, and the scent of fresh pastries drifting from street vendors. Naomi had decided to take a rare evening off, craving a walk through the city to clear her mind after a week of long shifts. She moved slowly, savoring the warmth of the early spring air, her senses alert to every sound and sight. She nearly collided with someone at a corner stand, and when she looked up, there he was, Marco Romano. He was holding 2 cups of gelato, his expression a mix of surprise and amusement. "Naomi?" he said, clearly not expecting to see her outside the restaurant. "I could ask you the same thing," she replied, smiling despite herself. There was something effortlessly charming about him, even in casual clothes, the evening light casting a golden hue over his features. "Thought I'd grab a treat," he said, offering her one of the cups. Naomi hesitated, then accepted, enjoying the shared moment more than she expected. They wandered through the stalls together, sampling small bites, laughing at little mishaps, and sharing stories that had nothing to do with work. For Naomi, it was an entirely new side of Marco, the man behind the polished restaurant owner, approachable, warm, and unexpectedly playful. She felt her usual reserve slowly fade as they talked, his presence somehow making the world feel less heavy. As they paused under a street lamp, their laughter settling into a comfortable silence, Marco stepped closer. Without a word, he offered a gentle, reassuring hug. Naomi leaned in, letting the quiet warmth wash over her. It was simple, yet it carried the same sincerity and care she had come to recognize in him. A promise that she was not alone. As they parted, Naomi realized that these small, unplanned moments could leave the most lasting impressions. She felt seen, valued, and quietly exhilarated by the possibility of what could come next. The soft hum of the restaurant's evening lights felt different tonight. Naomi lingered near the prep counter, letting the quiet wrap around her like a comforting blanket. She hadn't expected Marco to appear after hours, yet here he was, leaning casually against the doorway, eyes warm and observant. "Naomi," he began, his voice low and steady, "there's something I've been meaning to tell you." She felt a flutter in her chest, the anticipation almost tangible. She swallowed, unsure if she wanted to hear it or was afraid of what it might mean. Marco stepped closer, his hands relaxed at his sides, his gaze fixed on hers with sincerity that left no room for doubt. "I've been drawn to you, not just your talent in the kitchen but who you are. Your warmth, your quiet strength, it matters to me more than you realize." Naomi's breath caught. She had felt a pull toward him for weeks, the small smiles, shared glances, and lingering moments leaving impressions she couldn't ignore. Yet hearing it spoken aloud made her heart race, not with fear but with hope. I feel the same," she whispered, the words trembling but true. Marco's expression softened into a gentle smile, the kind that made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. Without another word, he stepped closer and wrapped her in a long, steady hug. It wasn't rushed or overbearing, it was a quiet, grounding embrace that spoke of trust, admiration, and a burgeoning love neither of them needed to define in that moment. Naomi rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the warmth and sincerity of his presence. The evening air inside the restaurant was electric, filled with anticipation for the special dinner Marco had promised. Guests murmured politely, glasses clinking, while staff moved gracefully between tables. Naomi adjusted her apron nervously, unsure of what to expect. Tonight was different. She could feel it in the way Marco's eyes kept finding hers across the room. When the moment arrived, Marco gestured toward the head of the long, elegantly set table. Naomi froze, momentarily unsure if she had heard correctly. "You want me to sit there?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Marco nodded, his warm smile unwavering. "You've earned it. I want everyone to see what I've known for a long time. You belong here, and your talent deserves recognition." The weight of the gesture sank in. The head of the table wasn't just a seat, it was acknowledgement, respect, and trust. Naomi's heart swelled with a mix of pride and surprise. She walked toward the chair, every step carrying the significance of the moment. As she settled into the seat, Marco came to stand beside her. In front of everyone he leaned down and offered a brief, congratulatory hug. It was simple, subtle, yet it spoke volumes, an affirmation of her skill, her presence, and their growing bond. Naomi felt a warmth that wasn't just from pride, it was from being seen truly and completely. The guests applauded lightly but Naomi barely noticed. Her focus remained on Marco's steady gaze, the unspoken connection between them, and the quiet joy of finally being recognized for all she had worked for. That night, she realized that recognition could be as intimate as a hug, as personal as a smile, and as powerful as any spoken words. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was present, appreciated, and ready for the possibilities that lay ahead. The night had settled over the city, leaving the restaurant quiet and empty except for Naomi and Marco. Plates had been cleared, the final orders logged, and the soft hum of the kitchen was now a gentle backdrop to their conversation. Naomi lingered near the counter, her hands folded, unsure how to begin. Marco leaned against the doorway, his posture relaxed but his eyes attentive. "You seem quieter than usual tonight," he said softly, not pressing but noticing. Naomi took a deep breath, the weight of the week pressing down on her. "I've had a lot on my mind," she admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. She spoke of small worries, doubts about her work, and moments when she felt invisible despite her efforts. Marco listened without interruption, his expression calm, offering only the comfort of his presence. When she finished, he stepped closer, a gentle smile touching his lips. "You don't have to carry everything alone," he said quietly. "I want to be here if you'll let me." Naomi hesitated, then nodded, feeling an unexpected relief. Slowly she stepped forward and Marco wrapped her in a comforting hug. It was warm, steady, and safe, a physical assurance that she wasn't alone, that her struggles didn't have to be borne in silence. They stayed like that for a long moment, letting the quiet intimacy speak louder than words ever could. In the embrace, Naomi felt a trust she had rarely allowed herself to feel. She realized that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was an opportunity to be seen, understood, and cared for. As they finally pulled apart, Naomi met Marco's gaze and smiled, a quiet gratitude in her eyes. In that shared space, they both understood that their connection went deeper than admiration or attraction. It was a foundation of trust, respect, and a growing love. The restaurant glowed softly under the evening lights, the warmth of the kitchen spilling into the dining area. Naomi moved with ease, chopping, stirring, and plating alongside Marco. Tonight, it wasn't about proving herself or impressing anyone, it was about being present, together, in a space they both loved. Marco watched her from across the counter, a quiet smile on his face. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice low but full of admiration. Naomi met his gaze and laughed softly, feeling the familiar warmth that always seemed to settle between them. "You make it easy to feel seen," she replied, her eyes reflecting the gentle glow of the lights. He stepped closer, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, and offered a hug that lingered just a little longer than usual. It wasn't dramatic or theatrical, it was steady, reassuring, and filled with everything unspoken: trust, respect, and love. Naomi rested her head against his shoulder, savoring the quiet intimacy that had become their language. They continued working side by side, laughter and conversation blending effortlessly with the rhythm of the kitchen. Every dish plated, every order delivered, was a reminder of the partnership they had built, both in work and in heart. As the last guests left and the lights dimmed, Naomi and Marco stood in the center of the kitchen, looking at each other with unspoken understanding. Here, in the heart of the restaurant, they had found more than passion for cooking, they had found each other. With a final, warm embrace, they sealed a promise that went beyond words. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, seen, valued, and loved.